shop. At home, she's never without a book at her elbow and spends sunny days working in her garden. She's married to Bob Meadows, who manages the Hopland tasting room for the Graziano family of wines. Welcome, Casey.
Yes, the first thing I want to say is that like a lot of the political forums we do, we'd love it if you guys would write your questions on 3x5 cards that are available to you, and there will be people in the aisles collecting those and bringing them on up to me, and we'll get as many questions as we can answered. I'm sure some of you have similar concerns, which will show up in the questions, and that's sort of my job is to try to get as much of the information out there as we can as quickly as possible. So while those questions are coming up, let me ask a question. Michael, perhaps, or both of you can probably answer this, Marie or Michael. How do you know what studies to believe?
I think the most important way of looking at a study is to look at the underlying assumptions. Because only really shoddy people lie in Excel. I mean, lie in the math. It's much more what are the assumptions. And in the case of the two retail leakage analysis, I think the assumptions about the trade area in both cases were pretty overstated. That was an error. Another error was the assumption that you could even capture all leakage. I'd like a show of hands who spent all of their money in Mendocino last year. Let's see. Show of hands. Didn't happen. Oh, we got one person. Okay. But I mean, let's face it, we probably spend 10% on the internet, 15% when we go out of town. I mean, we just don't all spend it in one place. It's not the way people behave. So I think that's a good way of looking at it. The other thing I think is the reputation of the individual who's preparing the report. I think that matters. That's what I would say.
Michael?
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting because I think there are, 2 or 3 different modes of decision making where you can get at the truth. So one mode of decision making is to, try to find good, reliable, objective people to do the studies. As an attorney, I am distrustful of that. I think that, there are a lot of interests out there and that objectivity is extremely difficult, if not impossible, and that having different studies from different groups is helpful into the mix, that we want to encourage as many folks to get involved in this as possible. And there should be more serious studies of skeptics of this project that can match the studies that have been done by proponents. I also would say that, I want to be clear that I based all of the numbers I presented to you tonight, with just a few exceptions, on the studies that were presented by DDR. So that's why I think that, it's useful as a kind of Gedonk experiment to let's grant all the assumptions and all of your numbers and see what the real impacts are.
Thank you. A lot of good questions here. Let's try, first of all, Michael, someone asked if you would be able to provide a handout of your economic analysis.
Well, here's the thing. I'm certainly, I put up an email at the end. If you didn't catch it, it's Schuman, S-H-U-M-A-N, at IGC, for Institute for Global Communication.org. So most of what's up there you can kind of see. And I think, I'd be happy to write a few paragraphs about it if someone is interested. What you really need to do, though, and I don't want to be a broken record here, but you need to hire someone who does what I did back of the envelope and moves it to 2 or 3 decimal points so that you have a serious set of calculations there.
Thank you.
I would also add that those studies are, for a number of reasons that you indicate, are limited in their value because they really are only market analyses. So they don't, for example, look at any of the tax implications of the choices that are before both the city and the county. They don't look at the long-term real estate implications for other properties that are also zone retail. So I think that there are other sets of research that you could do just in case you have decision makers that aren't decided or convinced, to help inform them more. I mean, the other side of the coin of this as well is, for some people, it doesn't matter how many studies you do, they have the opinion they have. And so I also think that an important part of any kind of planning process is how you influence decision makers. And in some cases, you do that with numbers on a page, and in some cases, you do that with numbers in a city council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I meant numbers of people. That wasn't obvious.
For Mr. Schuman and Marie Jones, I think you can probably answer some of this too, but in this room, you're preaching to the choir. What about those who love the idea of a big retail mall? And for Mr. Schuman specifically, you said that you believe that popular sentiment would be against the project 70 to 90%. What makes you think that?
Just a hunch. I think that the absence of participation in tonight's debate really underscores that, from my perspective, because it shows a lack of confidence in their own numbers and arguments. I guess I'm not being mic'd. I said that I believe that the absence of participation in tonight's debate underscores the lack of confidence in their own arguments and the ability to sway popular opinion.
Marie, any thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, I forgot the question.
Well, just in general, I mean, that there may be a lot of people who would like to have a big mall out there.
Yeah. I think there probably are a lot of people who want big box, and I know in Fort Bragg there are people who want big box as well. I think it just is a matter of there's a difference between where you want to shop and understanding where you want to shop versus understanding the implication of that is what that implication of that shopping is on your community. And I think when people come to understand that, they understand why wholehearted, arms open, tax-giving embrace of big box isn't always the best plan. And in the city of Fort Bragg, we actually have in our general plan determination that no development of more than 50,000 square feet can happen within city limits. And that essentially eliminates all big box. We still have grocery stores, we can have a Rite Aid, we can have a Long's Drugs, but there's never going to be a Walmart, there'll never be a Target, et cetera. And so as a community, you can make that decision and you can then fight this battle once instead of over and over.
Can I just add something here, which is that in my book, I actually take a position against general ordinances that block big boxes across the board. Because I do believe that it's important that the market provides some real options to people. And if this were a debate about whether or not you should have your first big box opportunity, my position would be very different. It's not a question of whether you have big box. You got it coming out of your ears here. You got dozens of big boxes. The question is whether you get 3 more behemoths on top of what you have already.
Thanks. To what extent do stores like Kohl's or some of these other, or even a TGI Fridays, those kinds of chain operations, to what extent do they pay attention to these conversations, or are they just dealing directly with DDR and they have no idea whether Ukiah wants them or not?
Well, my experience is that they pay a lot of attention. And, in fact, we've got, there are, just to take Walmart as an example, I mean, there are plenty of documents circulating, you can find them on the internet, where they basically send Confederates to audiences like this all over the country to report on what's going on, what opposition is like. They hire PR firms, they hire